Hey everyone, so it's time for Celebrity Death Roulette, and this is episode number 3, where Troy's assembled 10 random names. He doesn't know, I don't know. They're sort of like dropping them in a hat. I cannot study for this. This is all off the top of my head, and so you're seeing it just as it's happening. So we're gonna give it a shot. Remember, 2 minutes. That's all I have. As soon as I get to that 2 minute spot, I have to stop talking immediately. So let's go and let's see what happens. All right, spinning. Grady Stiles. Grady Stiles. Best known as Lobster Boy. He was of the carnival circuit. I forget what the actual name of his condition was. Something awfully, but he had his fingers were fused together, so it appeared like he had claws, and his toes were that way too. And Grady Stiles himself was a nasty man, bitter, and understandably, probably. He was in the sideshow circuit, so he was probably treated quite poorly by a lot of people. But he was an abusive man who had several relationships with women that were extremely abusive. He was, he had he didn't have fingers on his hands. He had these digits, these fused together thing, and but he had strength because he had to use a wheelchair. So they had a lot of upper body strength, and he would backhand people, just swing it as hard as he could. And he had a child with another woman, and he was so well hated that they put a hit out on him. And they got like these not innocent kids, because innocent kids don't shoot people, but they put a hit like for $2,000. Wanted to kill Grady because he was just a nasty man, to get him out of their lives. And they lived in a trailer park in Gibsonton, Florida, and it eventually unfolded, and actually the young kids just folded and blamed, I think it was on his first wife. Jeez, gosh, it just started coming back to me. We went to his grave in Sarasota not that long ago at Showman's Rest, and his son Grady Stiles Jr. still does sideshow stuff, and he sells plaster casts of his hands. And gosh, I wish I could remember the details of that murder case, but it was fascinating. Okay. Margot Kidder. Oh wait. That's gonna be tough. I don't know much about her death. I think she had I think she died of cancer. I loved her from the Amityville Horror. That's what I remember her from the most. And I remember that she had suffered from, I don't know if it was schizophrenia, some type of mental illness. Then she had a breakdown, and they ended up finding her in Glendale, in the hills of Glendale, behind a house, acting like a wolf or something. She was like in a shed, and she was like barking. I mean, it's not funny, but that's what was happening. And from the Superman movies, obviously, she was actually, I did meet her once. She was walking on Hollywood Boulevard, and I was doing the Graveline tour still. We had the Hearst Park, back when you could still park on Hollywood Boulevard in front of the Chinese Theater, starting the tour off. And she just happened to be walking by. I wish I had got a picture with her. She was really, really nice, but she did say, and I don't know if this was post or pre that incident in Glendale, but she did say that we should put her on the tour. So it was probably pre, actually, because it wouldn't have been as poignant, or it would have been more, I don't know what I'm saying. But I like Margot Kidder. I'm trying to think of other movies that she was in. Obviously Superman with Christopher Reeves. That's how she got into my popular, into my brain in Amityville Horror, which I was the first person in Detroit to get a ticket for Amityville Horror when it came out at the movie theater. As far as I know. I mean, we stood in line several hours before the movie opened to get tickets for the first showing. So maybe not all of Detroit, but Amityville Horror was a big deal for me, and the book scared the hell out of me. And 6, 5, Margot was really nice to me, and she was kind of funny. These get tougher and tougher. And Zsa Zsa, Princess Zsa Zsa. So Zsa Zsa Gabor was probably the most vivacious of the Gabor sisters, the most outspoken. There was Magda, there was Ava, and there was Zsa Zsa and the mother Jolie. And Zsa Zsa Gabor was the one that had they all had a lot of husbands, I think. I think she married 7 or 8 times. Her last husband was that Prince von, there's a lot of other things that people call him, but Prince von A-hole is probably the most famous. And I know that she was bedridden for the last several years of her life. She had gotten into a car accident with her hairstylist who hit a post on Sunset Boulevard, a lamp post. I have a piece of that lamp post actually. And she had never been seen in Hollywood after that. She was bedridden, and the prince sort of kept her under wraps. And even her own daughter, Francesca Hilton, kept her away from Zsa Zsa as she lay in bed. She did have her auction after she died, or actually just an estate sale, and her house was open, and we got a lot of stuff from that estate sale, including like photographs that the prince just was ripping her photo albums in half and selling them off, and we have like clothes of hers that were just not very nice, and we got the concrete urns from around her table. She was or from around her pool. She was in Pee-wee's Christmas special as Princess Zsa Zsa, and she had a scene with the countess, the talking cow, give her a jingle bell, cowbell. And was it the Outer Space movie? She was like the princess of outer space or the queen of outer space or something like that. But when I was young, I could never differentiate the different Gabors, Zsa Zsa and Ava. And Zsa Zsa, of course, was the more scandalous one, getting arrested for slapping the police officer in Beverly Hills. And she was actually cremated, and that's a good story too. Lili St. Cyr. Boy, that's a tough one. Lili St. Cyr was a burlesque model, dancer. I think that she originated the champagne glass thing where there's a champagne glass on stage and she does sort of a burlesque show in the glass and with the bubbles and taking fan dancing and things like that. I knew Lili St. Cyr because there's a verse in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, in the Rocky Horror Show, the play, and it's Janet says, God bless Lili St. Cyr, after they do their whole in their corsets and their pants and their garters and everything. So I knew her more so from that. Lili St. Cyr lived near me, actually, in Hollywood, not far from me at all. I did a story on Find a Death about her. All these stories are on Find a Death, I think. And she had a shop on Hollywood Boulevard, on Santa Monica Boulevard, across from the Star. Oh gosh, what was that club that Eddie Nash owned on Santa Monica Boulevard? Star Guard, no. But anyway, her shop was right across from it. And the kid from Cherie Curry from the Runaways needed a bustier or what do they call them for their act, and she literally ran across the street to Lili St. Cyr's shop and bought herself one of those for her act as the Runaways. And oh my God, was it?
It was Santa Monica and
Santa Monica and Crescent Heights, wasn't it? Yeah. Star something, but Eddie Nash, the gangster, owned the place. And Lisa, our old next door neighbor, was a costume designer and our costumer for films, and she gave me an autographed picture of Lili St. Cyr. But the burlesque ads and for lingerie, kind of like the Fredericks of Hollywood stuff, she was always in the back of magazines. I did have stuff for all that. I was surprised. Danny Lockin, my goodness. It's a tough one to because I know Danny Lockin was the young man who was featured in Hello Dolly, the featured dancer in Hello Dolly, the movie with Barbra Streisand, and he may have been in the Broadway show as well. And boy, I could not tell you much more about his career. He was a singer and he was a dancer. And I know towards the end of his life, his mother, I think, was a pianist, and he was teaching piano lessons. I wish I could have studied up for these. But Danny Lockin ended up going out to a bar one night, and this would have been in the 80s or late 70s, early 80s, and picked up a guy, and they went home together, and Danny Lockin ended up being pretty brutally murdered. And it was one of those, I mean, like really brutal, like lots of stabbing and slashing and beating and all that business. And it went unsolved for a while, I think, and the police were making it into an. Oh, I guess they found some porn magazines in the apartment, crappy little apartment in Anaheim. It was a terrible place. When Troy and I went there to do the story for Find a Death on that, and he said if I piss him off, he's gonna spread my ashes there when I die. But Danny Lockin was tragically murdered, and I believe that the guy, they eventually convicted him for the murder. I don't think he spent that much time in prison at all, and I know he's buried at down in Orange County, in a cemetery in Orange County, Westminster Memorial Park, or yeah. But he is, and Hello Dolly, the fountain from Hello Dolly's at Knott's Berry Farm. Jimmy Stewart, we like Jimmy Stewart. I mostly knew Jimmy Stewart through my old roommate in Chicago, Bun, we still are quite close. And she's the one who got me interested in seeing Jimmy Stewart movies. And Mr. Smith Goes to Washington stands out because I think it won the Academy Award in 1939 against The Wizard of Oz. I believe it was certainly nominated that year against The Wizard of Oz. Jimmy Stewart was nominated several times for Academy Awards. He was a military man, enlisted in the military, wasn't drafted, but chose to, much like a lot of people back then, like Gary Cooper. And his son tragically died in Vietnam. And that was still something, I remember seeing him on the talk shows, that he would get really quite emotional about that on talk shows. And he also got quite emotional about his golden retrievers. We used to see him actually on Roxbury Drive walking his golden retrievers occasionally. And he waved to the hearse a couple of times. One time he came over to the hearse, to the Gravelines hearse, and said in that Jimmy Stewart way, "You're in a hearse." And when we used to go, and my friend Steve and I used to go just get hammered, and then we'd go to Beverly Hills and we'd explore. It was back when you could, when you didn't have to be afraid of being, killed by security or something like that. And like we hopped over Lucy's fence, and we hopped over Jimmy Stewart's fence, and I got to poke around in his garden. And I don't know why. Well, Jimmy Stewart had a garden, a famous garden that he would take vegetables over to Lucy and Jack Benny and Peter Falk, who lived across the street from him. And also that famous Lucille Ball episode where they take the tour of the stars' homes, and she and Ethel get off the bus. It's in front of Jimmy Stewart's house, actually, in real life, where they filmed that. And Lucy and Ethel cross the street to Lucy's real house on Roxbury Drive and walk up to the fence. Then it goes over to a soundstage for that. But Jimmy Stewart... I like Jimmy Stewart a lot. Paul Reubens, Pee-wee. So Pee-wee Herman was from Florida originally, I believe. He came to Hollywood. He was a member of the Groundlings comedy troupe, one of the founding members, of which our dear friend Terry Bolo, who used to work with us at Duly Departed Tours, was a founding member of the Groundlings, along with they all studied together, Phil Hartman and Lorraine Newman and Cassandra Peterson, who ended up being Elvira. They developed the Pee Wee Herman character at the Groundlings. It eventually morphed into its own show, a stage show at the Roxy Theater. And a lot of people helped, including Phil Hartman. He helped develop the whole series. In fact, he was originally Captain Carl, I think. And it was And some people were kind of jealous of Paul when he made it into a movie because he didn't invite the entire gang from the Groundlings to work with him. I think Edie McClurg was one of the people who was kind of annoyed with him. And so it became hugely successful as Pee Wee Herman. The Pee Wee's Big Adventure came out, and then the Pee Wee Herman Playhouse show, Saturday mornings, came out. And that was a huge hit because it amused adults as well as kids, because he could say things like, go to your refrigerator and get, a pound of coconut shavings and throw it on the floor and make angels, snow angels. And so adults like that humor too. And of course, famously, he was arrested in Sarasota at an adult movie theater for having a good time by himself. And that was hugely scandalous. It almost ruined him. But a lot of people came out in support of him, including Bill Cosby, which is just leaving that comment there. But he ended up making it, coming out of it quite well. Pee Wee Herman, Paul Reubens did die about a year and a half ago in the Hollywood Hills and is buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And he's got a nice little bow tie on his grave marker. Dick York. Dick York is a guy, I wish I remembered more about his career. Of course, we all know him as the original Darren Stevens on Bewitched. And he was in Westerns mostly, some films, some TV, and famously had an accident where he had fallen off a horse and screwed up his back. So when he was doing the Bewitched show, he was cast as the original Darren. Dick Sargent was one of the people that was considered actually for the original part as Darren, but he was busy. So Dick York got the part, and he made it for several years, but actually had so many back problems that they hardly ever showed him standing up at all. A lot of sitting down. They say during the breaks, he'd have to want to lean on a platform. He couldn't sit right properly anymore, and he eventually left the show, and that's why they got Dick Sargent. They filmed quite a few episodes of a season of Bewitched without Darren, and Samantha, I think, sometimes would even pretend like he was there and just yell upstairs or something like that. But he retired to Rockford, Michigan, which I always found quite curious. Why Rockford, Michigan? Maybe that's where he's from originally. I'm not quite sure. I think I talked to him on the phone once during a radio interview. Jonathan Brandmeier in Chicago used to call up a lot of old sitcom stars. I don't know if I talked to him, but I certainly wrote him. And I got this really bizarre envelope back with this bizarre drawing on it. It said, Scott, he wrote, Scott, thanks for the plot. Scott, thanks for the plot. He didn't know anything about me. That's just the way he sounded. And then he wrote on this envelope a weird face with curly hair, and it said, love ya Lizzie on it, which is clearly a reference to Elizabeth Montgomery, but it was just odd on this Scott, thanks for the plot autograph. And he quit mysteriously. They, from Bewitched, they added Dick Sargent instead. And Reta Shaw. I wish I knew more about her too. Reta Shaw was a sturdy woman who was in a ton of almost every 60s television program you can imagine. And I'll just throw out my favorites, which were The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. She was on Bewitched. She was on Andy Griffith. She always played that sort of, she was likable. She played a lot of housekeepers. In fact, she was one of the housekeepers with Hermione Baddeley in Mary Poppins, I believe. Ghost and Mrs. Muir, and of course, my all-time favorite movie, The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, where she eats your tapioca. And she did live in the San Fernando Valley, and she did die in the San Fernando Valley quite normal old, you know what I mean? She didn't die of any tragic cause at a young age. And I stumbled on her grave by accident, actually, at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills. I think I was looking for Alvy Moore, who played Hank Kimball on Green Acres. And she happened to be just to the right and above him. Had no idea that she was even there. But I like Reta Shaw quite a bit. She had a really distinctive voice. Ghost of Mr. Chicken, she's very good as a spiritualist. Caro Solomon, I think was what they used to say. And yeah, I really liked her very much. I got another 30 seconds to fill with this. But she was of that same, Sandra Gould was another one. Lorene Tuttle, which was like one of my favorite names ever. Were of those women who were always in shows. There was all of them, like Hermione Gingold, although she had more, she had film career too. But they were just staples on 60s television. These over-the-top, very characteristic people. I mean, not just generic. They had very definite ways of carrying themselves. And she, whew, like Reta Shaw. People used to call her Reta. I don't know if that's true. Here's another one of those old faithful character actresses, Mary Wickes, who was in, my gosh, most people know her from Sister Act. She played the most nun-like of the nuns, I think. She was a sister, I forget what her name was in that. But she was another one that showed up in a ton of different shows in the 60s. Probably was in Bewitched. She was in the Bing Crosby White Christmas movie. I think she played a telephone operator in that. I know that she ended up being in Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. I know that I did write her a fan letter once, and I got a letter, I got a nice note back from her where she just ripped off the bottom. I wrote, "Can I have your autograph?" And she just ripped my note in half and wrote her autograph on it, which is great. I mean, fine, I don't care. But she just wrote Mary Wickes on it and sent it back. Very nice of her. And I did go to her funeral at All Saints in Beverly Hills. I think Humphrey Bogart's funeral was there. Frank Morgan's funeral was there. Somebody else fairly recently had a memorial service there. And I do remember Kathy Najimy was there, I remember being there. And she was like the big celebrity that was there, which is kind of sad because Mary Wickes has been in a ton of things. And Kathy Najimy was spoke at the memorial service. I don't know whatever happened to her body. And then we ended up spending some time with Kathy Najimy in Galveston, Texas, at an autograph show that I was appearing in. It was a Dash Beardsley paranormal show, and we had a not so pleasant experience with Kathy Najimy. I was sort of disappointed. Yeah. No, it was not very nice. I think I wrote about it. I did a blog about it, but she was, pass. Oh, the game's over. That seemed to fly this time around. Huh. Well, there you are. So that's this number 3, Celebrity Death Roulette number 3. I enjoy these. I hope you do too. This is it's always a bit of fun. And stay tuned for the next one. Should be soon. Take care. Thanks for watching. Bye.
You heard me.